watch us. And then we can start.
I don't know what let's see here.
Twitter and Facebook. And we are live. Hi, everyone. Good evening, morning, whatever it is where you are. Welcome to the September author chat, and thank you again for being here. Before we begin, I have one important thing to say. If you're an author and would like to join us, we usually talk about these live streams in the AuthorTube group on Facebook. If you're not there, feel free to message me at any point in time and we'll get it sorted. And now, dear all, please introduce yourselves for just a tiny bit. I know you did it last time too, but you know, it's been a month, so people are forgetful. Should we do it in the order I see you in? Because I'll be asking the question as well. Okay, cool. So Misha, you go first, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Misha. I live in South Africa and I'm a fantasy writer.
Thank you. Nicki?
Hi everyone, it's Nicki here. I'm also known as Aster Idonia, and I write genre fiction under one pen name and LGBT fiction under my other pen name.
Oh, we have people talking to us in the chat, by the way. Sarah, your turn.
Hi, I'm Sarah Scharnweber. I'm a writer from Northern Illinois in the US, and I mostly write horror.
Yay. That's not scary at all. I think I'm mostly afraid of writing horror because I think I get it horribly wrong. But for some reason, the only inspiration I get lately for new stories is horror. And I'm like, what am I doing here? What's wrong with me? So
yeah, just go for it.
I think I will, but I still need to, you know, prepare myself for the journey because I don't think it will be as easy as writing everything else. So because I was just introducing my little tale about inspiration and horror, today's topic is writing inspiration. And Nicki was kind enough to write a few questions for us to get us started. And if at any point you feel like adding something more or asking something, please feel free. We're just using the questions as sort of guidelines for the conversation. So we've already cleared what genres we write in. Well, except me, I didn't say it. I usually write fantasy or paranormal or sometimes contemporary and probably sometime in the future horror if I get brave enough. The first question would be, what inspired you to write in your genre of choice? Misha?
Basically, what happened was I actually started with romance. And then I was reading Chronicles of Narnia for the second time. And basically just a character walked into my head and that was basically it. I just started because I found a character that was interesting. And then it kind of became this thing where I wanted to write something that was a homage to Chronicles of Narnia. It was actually and still is one of my favorite stories. But I think mine went into a very much a lot of a darker place than that. But that's basically where it started. And yeah, I'm so glad I did do it. Although, like you, it was a terrifying thing to do because it was completely different as I've ever written. So, yeah.
Okay, Nicki?
I guess I'm always been drawn to the fantasy paranormal sort of stuff. So that was like a natural fit for me. I watch a lot of that sort of stuff, read a lot of that sort of stuff. In terms of the LGBT fiction, I actually started off editing it. And it was while I was editing it for other people that I saw a load of anthology calls and thought, oh, you know, I can write this. I used to write / fan fiction. I can write some original stories. So that was sort of the inspiration to go off and try some of that, which has probably now become predominant over my mainstream genre writing.
Sarah?
I always kind of like horror and stuff, but then I would try to write things and it didn't really matter what I was trying to write. It would just come out spooky. So I just kind of went with it.
Yeah, kind of meant to be, I guess. For me, I started with vampires because I just loved vampires. So I think I'd seen all the vampire movies and read all the vampire books that were available in Romania at that time. And then I expanded my horizons once Kindle happened and I could buy books online. And from there, I mean, I started with male-female romances, and then I just connected with a lot of gay romance and fiction authors, and I started reading in that genre, and I thought, I kind of like this. This is a lot more permissive and more, it takes more risks than a male-female relationship, but I kind of stuck to paranormal, sci-fi, fantasy. Contemporary was something I wasn't really sure I could pull off. And I tend to write it super angsty when I do write it, because why not? And I tend to go kind of dark with stories when it comes to paranormal and sci-fi, because again, why not? And I'm really a scaredy cat, so I love like thrillers and mysteries and horror, but I'm kind of terrified of it. So I would like to write it, but I'm more comfortable reading it for now. So it wasn't like something that came to me because I got the story or something like that, or an idea of a character. It was more that I read in all these genres and I wanted to explore stories in those universes. I lost my question document because I have too much stuff open here. I'm a mess. I apologize for that. It's after midnight. I'm going to use that as an excuse throughout this chat. So yeah. Next question. Where do your story ideas come from? And do you start with plot or character? Misha?
That actually depends. I'm a rather strange duck when it comes to that. I actually have... So I get the plot first. Sometimes I get the characters first with The War of Six Crowns, which is my epic fantasy young adult thing. It started with a character, which I'm not going to tell who because it's going to be a spoiler and some people might one day watch it and be like, no! And then, for example, with my adult urban fantasy that I wrote, Endless, it was a concept that I wanted to write about an immortal that had amnesia. And so that was kind of, I had the idea, and then from that I kind of worked back towards what I wanted to happen, and then from that I could be the best set of characters to tell that story with. And then some of my other stories, even then also, sometimes I dream stories. Weird, but I have completely unrelated dreams to completely anything on would be completely unrelated to that. And then, but it would be basically as if it's a book. And then I would be able to pick the main idea that I want from that kind of dream and turn that into a story. But sometimes, again, that would be a book that would hook me, or otherwise it would be the concept. So it's actually kind of even for me.
Nicki?
I think I'm probably pretty similar to Misha, actually. I mean, I get some ideas through dreams. When I wrote the Ragnarok Chronicles, which is my mainstream pieces, that was a dream initially that then sort of ran off on its like own tangent for 210,000 words. But other times it can be a much more careful process. I mean, I do a lot of anthology calls, so generally I'll be looking at what the calls want and I'll be consciously trying to come up with ideas. And it's also, for me, the same as Misha, a mix of plot and character. There's some stories where the plot idea comes first and characters fall into place after that. But then there's been others where I've just had this really strong character idea, like my MM Souls for Sale. I got the idea for the character of Saul before the rest of the story really came together. So it absolutely depends, and just based on the different story, what works for that and how my mind ticks over.
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
I'm actually probably really weird. I don't plot at all. So one of the things about that is that I don't really start with either. I start with a picture of something, or a line, or a phrase. Like I start, like, I don't have any idea where I'm going from point A to point B at all. A lot of times when I'm done writing, I don't even actually remember what I just wrote. Like, it's a really strange thing that, like, I'm not terribly conscious of.
But that sounds cool.
I wish I understood it a little more. I think that would help.
Probably. For me, it's...
Sorry, and I just wanted to say that's very close to my method for when I'm doing rough drafting as well, except that character and stuff. But I do, part of the reason why I write by hand is so that I can actually just let the words come. And the moment, basically, I always feel ready to write when I have an idea of where I want to go, but the moment that I have, like, the first phrase in my to write, the moment that comes into my head, that's when I want to start writing. That's, I think it's kind of similar to what you're experiencing, so no, you're not weird.
Okay, that's good. I mean, I am, but that's probably not proof.
We're both weird in an excellent, brilliant, awesome way, because we're both brilliant and awesome.
Just to settle this, I don't know any people who aren't weird, so I'm sorry for you guys, but that ship has sailed. So in my case, I kind of get inspiration from everywhere. It can be something as mild as walking through the safest place in the whole country, which is like quiet and nice and cozy, and then I get an idea for something really cruel and brutal, because that's how my mind works. Like, we were in the Danube Delta, in this small sort of village where I think nothing wrong ever happens, because everybody knows everybody and the tourists are just there for the fun. It's not a really tourist rich attraction, and the whole time I was there, all the stories I could think of were either serial killer stories or monster stories. That was all I got. But it can be like a book I read and there's a line there that sparks a character or a situation or a movie or a song or everything. And like Misha said, it can be sometimes a character, sometimes a plot idea or a situation idea. Like, I wanted at some point to write about angels who think they're fallen, but they aren't. And I did that. I wrote like 2 short stories on it because I just wanted to explore that concept. Why did they fall? Why they think they're fallen, and how would a god-like creature treat them afterwards? And other times it's just an image. Like, I see this beautiful picture and I imagine a story in it, and it grows from there. But I do plot. I feel better when I plot the bare bones of the story. I know where it starts, where it goes, and how it ends, and that's about it. Then I can just dance my way around everything else if I have a clear direction. So we've talked about story ideas. How about like general inspiration to write? Where do you get that? Misha?
My ideas come from everywhere. I have some ideas come to me while I'm reading. For example, if I write, like with War of Six Crowns happened because I was reading Prison's Caspian ahead of the movie being released. But other times it's a dream, and then still other times it would be me trying to think of or having something that interests me, or if I'm watching a movie or something, and my brain would kind of take this random idea from this movie and think, but okay, but what if this kind of thing was there instead, or what if this thing was the thing that was driving the entire problem, and then I would write that instead. So I'm trying to think of, for example, with my Amnesiac Immortal was when I was actually reading Twilight, which sounds really weird, but it was about this whole thing I was reading. Actually, it was like at the height of Stephanie Meyer's popularity at that stage, and then I was reading an article about her, and she said that her whole idea actually came from a dream where she was dreaming about this girl who was with a vampire, and the vampire wanted to kill her, but he also loved her. And then I kind of thought about that and thought, but okay, but I don't want to do vampires because I'm not the kind of person who just kill her at a given stage. But then I did like the idea of immortality, and I did like the idea of them actually needing to be enemies, and that's kind of what I got together. But then I mixed it with griffins and phoenixes, which is completely like off in a completely different tangent, but ideas together in order to start my concept, instead of sticking to what was familiar and just trying to do something. Yeah, so that's basically how I get to ideas. It sounds, sorry if I'm going to ramble and be random. It's
fine. That's the whole point. Like if we wanted to be super structured and short, I'd say, okay, answer in 30 seconds and no more. So it's fine. Rambling is welcome. Okay, good.
No, so for me, it's, and even with my thing with the War of Six Crowns. Yeah, also back to being random tangent when we were talking about editing stuff out earlier. A lot of what I edit out is my with as I'm thinking about what I'm doing. So I keep repeating words until I remember what I want to say. Great. Now, back to what I was talking about. Okay, so Six Crowns, for example, was Chronicles of Narnia, but with a way for the characters to actually be able to interact with both worlds at any given time. So they could, as long as they can get to a portal, they can actually get back to England and back to the fantasy world in a space of a certain amount of hours, for example, but not really, not like Narnia, where you would live in Narnia for 20 years and then come out in 5 seconds past in this life. And then when you go back to Narnia, then thousands of years have passed. And because I didn't want that. I wanted to have a situation where both worlds, from my fantasy world and England basically, could interact with each other and have an effect on the story. So, but that was basically my thing was, in the first place, well, what if it was a bit different and more political? And the other thing was that what if they could actually interact, and where something that happens, my books are young adult for this fantasy series. So what if the stuff that happens in high school actually has a political effect on what's happening on the other side, and vice versa? But that's kind of where it comes from, is even if I do start, for example, with something that came from Chronicles of Narnia in a sense, I always take it way past that point of being recognizably the same, because it's not interesting to me to write the same thing all over again. And some people love my books for it, but other people think I'm completely desecrating the fantasy genre because my characters speak like modern people. High school, how else are they supposed to speak?
Well, if it's urban fantasy or anything that has to do with modern times, I don't understand why they wouldn't speak like normal people.
Yeah, I think, I think people have this assumption because it's actually epic fantasy still, but with a modern twist at one side. And then they kind of assume that we must also, thou must, or thou wilt not, and these formalized English speaking. And they're teenagers. Yes, fine. So one of them is slightly homicidal and very, very deeply angry, but that doesn't make him the saintly, oh, Father dearest, where shall we be going today kind of person. He's the kind of person where a conversation is, why'd you kill me? Answer being, because I wanted you dead. So that's kind of the conversations happening in my books, and people aren't always a fan of that, but I enjoyed that. I kind of to see the interplay between what's modern and what's really classical and timeless, and that's been continuing in this fantasy world, and having that kind of clash against each other the whole time. Where I enjoy finding stories. Okay.
Which to me it's interesting. Nicki, where do you get inspiration to keep writing?
Before I answer that, I'll just make a little point about what Misha just said, because it's quite interesting that her books, she was saying that they wanted those thous in, because I've got a story coming out, I don't know the exact date yet, but it's a fantasy in a medieval-esque setting, and my editor made me take out every single thou. And I had written it in that sort of heroic, epic style. So I actually think I confused the editor, because I made it really proper, and I had thou when he was talking to someone of a lesser status, and you, of course, when he was addressing someone else. And she was going, it's not consistent. And it's like, it is consistent. It's just like different classes of people. But I decided not to argue him, so I just took them all out. But yes, I thought that was interesting that, your readers are saying put them in, and I've got my editors going, take them out. But back to the question. As I mentioned earlier, Ragnarok Chronicles came from a dream. I think that's probably the only one that I've had in that way, though. Most of them do come, and I think, Misha, you and I must be like sort of writing soul sisters or something, because I have a very similar process to you, that I'll usually be reading something, watching something, and an idea will come to me, and it'll be like, oh, well, I love this story, but what if it happened differently, or what if there was this other aspect to the plot, which then takes me off into my own story idea from there. So I've had quite a few that have come that way. Sometimes it's the whole show or the whole book. Sometimes it's just a character. I mean, I'm working on a piece at the moment where one of the characters shares a few character traits with, don't laugh, Alina, Elijah Michelson in the originals. I told you not to laugh. I told you not to laugh. Sorry. I mean, they're not the same character, but some of the aspects of their character, they're shared, and that's where that character came to me too. And that's in the story I'm writing now. It was that character who appeared first, and then the plot kind of revolved around him. So yeah, I mean, I won't ramble on, but I'll say it's probably very similar to Misha, that it comes from something that I'm exposed to, whether it's a TV show or film, and that just sparks like a little springboard idea into something else.
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
That's a hard question to answer, but there are a couple different places. One of them is that I think that I need a creativity outlet that doesn't require the same kind of focus and like regular updates that writing do. So like my husband's the same way. He paints and then like just puts them up in our house. They're not great. They're just what he does. But like I play Dungeons and Dragons, and that's just like this whole creative thing that's outside of anything that I'm required to do to like impress anyone. So I feel like it's so much because it's like a risk-free thing. I think having that is really helpful, because I can kind of throw away the things that pop in from wherever they pop in from that are kind of useless by working through them there. So I feel like that's one of the things that helps me to remain inspired to keep going.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, we've got a visitor because he's not getting enough attention. Don't. Oh, God. Go away. Sorry about that. My dog needs attention, apparently, especially if I'm talking to someone. So
My cats are the same way.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I understand what you say about doing stuff that's still creative, but doesn't come with the same pressure, because I do like to brainstorm ideas for other stories that are not mine. I think that helps me be quite creative, and it's not the same pressure. I just have to come up with some ideas or say what I like and what I don't like and then move on. And that's fun because my boyfriend is interested in narrative and narrative-based stories, games, and he wants to develop games. So when I talk to him about his games and his story ideas, I find it super relaxing and inspiring at the same time. But other than that, whenever I read or watch a really interesting story, that super inspires me to just go and write immediately after. And the last time that happened was last night. We were watching a Japanese animation movie, something which was called Jinro, I think. I will search for it and leave a link in the description. Really great movie. Wasn't perfect. It had some issues with too much exposition, which I think we're all familiar with from, books, but this movie had the same problem. But other than that, it was a really great movie, and it was actually an interesting twist on Little Red Riding Hood. But, the original super dark and creepy version.
Yeah.
Because, apparently we can't watch a movie, my boyfriend and I, unless it crushes our soul completely. If it's not like that, we just can't watch it. So that was, in this particular case, I think that was the exact movie I needed to see, because I was thinking of writing a story which is loosely based on a Romanian fairy tale, which is creepy as all hell. It's about a goat and her 3 little, whatever they're called, baby goats. And yeah, that I didn't know. Let's just call them baby goats because it sounds sweet and we need sweet by the end of this. And then here comes a wolf, and he waits for her to go to the market or something. And then brutally murders 2 of the baby goats. He cuts their heads and places them in the window so that from far away it looks like the baby goats are waiting for their mommy. And the 3rd one is left there, like all traumatized and stuff. And then the goat comes home. She's all happy that her children are waiting for her. And then, oh no, they're all dead. Well, 2 of them are dead. It doesn't end well for the wolf because they kind of trick him to fall into a fire and he burns to death. So yeah, it's dark. It's super dark, but those were the fairy tales we grew up with. And about what Misha said, about going to a different world and then when coming back a lot of time has passed, that's actually the plot line of a Romanian fairy tale that's called something like Youth Without Old Age and Life Without Death. And it's a sort of a fairy realm where the character goes, and when he comes back, it's been hundreds and hundreds of years. Everybody he knew dies, and he dies too in the end. Because like the old age catches up with him, and yeah, now that I think about it, the most beloved fairy tales of my childhood were dark and depressing as hell. Oh God. Yeah,
I'm gonna have to try and find some English translations of these.
Oh my God, I will search for some, and if I find any, I will share them because
yes, do.
I want to turn the goat story into a serial killer story because why not? It would be nice for the media to call the serial killer the big bad wolf because, why not? And I think it would be an interesting concept to explore in crime scene investigation Romania style, which is, I hope it's better than it was 10 years ago, but I had a little incident with some guy holding a knife to my throat. And they came to take prints, and it didn't go very well. And their sketch art that was a completely different story. I mean, I expected a guy to come draw. Now they were just making a composite from different photos that they had of suspects or convicted guys, and nobody in those photos looked like the guy who had, you know, attacked me. That was an interesting experience. And then I think like 7 or 8 years later, I get a sort of a resolution, I think, from the court who was handling the case. And their finding was that there was no person who committed this crime. I was like, what was it, the cat? Their language was so weird. What do you mean there was no person who committed the crime? You mean you couldn't find the person who did it? But no, actually, you know, I agree with you. It was a bear freaking holding a knife on me, not a man. Definitely it wasn't a person. So I think trying to find the serial killer with that level of skill should be interesting.
Perhaps you could set your new bungling detective on it, Alina.
No. No, they don't die. If the clueless detectives get this case, they all die. Like, everybody dies. The entire country is freaking doomed. I mean, in this book we're trying to write, which is the first one, they've been trying to find the freaking dog for months and can't find it. So, no. No, I don't think that's a great idea. I think like really the entire country would be wiped out and they still wouldn't be able to find the killer. So, no. Would you guys say that you have a muse, or do you view writing more of like a rational process? Misha?
That's a tricky question. I do refer to a muse when I talk about my creative process, but I do realize that I don't have a muse. Complicated. When I'm writing almost like what we were talking about earlier, me and Sarah, where I don't even realize what I had written after I wrote it. I don't reread what I've written either until I'm finished writing a rough draft. So for me, it's almost like a type of automatic writing where it is coming from outside of myself. I don't know how to explain it, and it's so for that I call it my muse, but I realize it's actually somewhere I just lock deep into my subconscious before I start writing. It's basically what I'm doing. So I can rationalize it. I just prefer not to, because it's just last time also it was like, you know, I grew up with writing not being particularly romantic, so just let me have this one thing that's fantastic and it's a muse. It's just that one thing I needed. But I do realize it's a lot more rational like that than that for me.
Thank you. Nicki?
I'd probably say it's a bit of each for me. When I wrote Ragnarok Chronicles, Loki is one of the principal characters, and I felt really close to Loki when I was writing, and I sort of thought of him as a bit of a muse, definitely for that story. And I still do in a way. Sometimes I'm sort of channeling him a bit when I'm writing, particularly on the stories where there's sort of mischievous characters and things. But for other pieces, it tends to be more rational. And I'd say it's probably depends how I got the idea or the inspiration to write the piece, because I tend to think of a muse more, focus on Loki, when it's a piece that I've come to just completely on my own. However, I'm probably a bit more rational when it comes to writing anthology-call stories, because then I've got that theme and I'm purposefully thinking, I want to write a story on this theme. It has to suit this, and this requirement. So that's probably a slightly different process to me than the ones that just come to me spontaneously, I guess.
Yeah, I get it. Sarah?
I don't think I've ever described myself as having a muse seriously, but I I don't really think about it like that, so it's a hard question to answer. But so I guess I'm probably just analytical about it, like I am about everything else. That's probably.
I think I like to refer to a muse, but it's a bit more rational than that. I mean, you get ideas from somewhere and you don't know where they are from, and it's nice to refer to whatever sparks them as your muse. But I think sometimes I'm more productive when I rationally think about a story, about my schedule, about what I'm supposed to be writing, what I'm supposed to be saying. So I think I'm kind of in the middle about this. There is definitely a part that's unpredictable, and you can try your best to feed that muse and get more inspiration, but it's not something you control. And then there's the rational part of just putting words on paper and thinking of plots and developing characters, which is something you can control to a point. I don't know if it makes perfect sense what I'm trying to say. But yeah, that's kind of how I view it. And speaking of things we can't control, if you ever hit a slump, what do you do? You just kickstart your imagination and get out of said slump? Misha?
It depends. Okay, I am terrible about this. I never answer straight. I have two reasons to have a slump. On the one hand, it's just a normal writer's block, and on the other, burnout. If it's just a normal writer's block, usually that's caused by me getting stuck somewhere in my story because I pant when I'm rough drafting. So then what I would then be doing is on to another story until I feel out of the slump, because then one day I would literally be working on, say, Endless while I'm writing something in the War of Six Crowns, and I'll go, oh goodness, okay, I know what the problem was in that thing, and then I just go work on the first book again, and that basically gets me out of it again. But if I'm tired or just emotionally stressed out or anxious about something, and I just can't get myself to write, I always say it feels like sipping yogurt but trying to sip it through a straw. Every word I write, even if it's to write a blog post, it just feels like it's not coming to me. Then I just leave it alone. I actually start writing, and I start doing things like crocheting or walking around or doing art or anything still creative, but that's completely not related anyway. And then eventually my mind rests and then it just comes back on its own. But I try to avoid that feeling because it can take me as much as 6 months. It's like taking 6 months to write.
Nicki?
I don't really get writer's block too much. I had a bit of a slump late last year, early this year, but that was because we had a couple of publisher closures happening, one hard on the heels of the other. And so that was a bit disheartening, and that kind of just put me off writing in general for a few months until I got my mojo back, if you like. It's odd at the moment because I've only got one story on the go, which is unusual for me because usually I am working on 2 or 3 different things at the same time. And that's mostly because there haven't been any anthology calls that have appealed to me in the last few months. So usually I've got a major work plus a few shorts. So if I do sort of start writing one and I'm just not feeling it that day, usually I just swap to one of the others that I'm working on. So it's not really a block as such, although I guess similar to Misha, sometimes because I don't really plot either, you do kind of write yourself to a point and then you suddenly realize you're a bit stuck. And it sometimes just takes a day or two for your mind to tick over where you're going to move to next. And usually I would just pick up a different story, or I'll just put on my favorite TV show or film, or pick up one of my favorite books and just inspire myself that way with something that I love.
Sarah?
I don't get writer's block so much as I get drive block, where like I just don't feel like bothering with it. And it's not necessarily that the story is the problem, really. It's that I just don't feel like it. And there's other things I'd rather do, like sit around and do nothing. But usually for that, what I do is I just like remove myself from my house. I'm pretty much a hermit, so I just have to kind of like go somewhere that isn't inside my house. Sometimes like my own backyard will work. It's just like getting away from it for a little bit so that it doesn't feel quite as tedious. And then usually I feel better after that, so.
Yeah, no, I get that too a bit. Like, I know I should be writing, I have the time to write, but I just don't feel like it. And in most cases, there is a trigger for it. There's a reason why I don't want to do it. And I try to get to the bottom of that. Sometimes it leads to a really bad slump. Like last year, I had 6 months, I think. And throughout those 6 months, I wrote under 10,000 words. It had to do with one of our publishers closing down, which Nicki has experienced as well. And that was a very strange time and a very stressful one, actually. So I was just put off writing altogether. I didn't know what I wanted to do with writing in the future or with my life in general. And the other problem that causes me to have drive issues is that I kind of tend to take on too much. Sometimes because I have to, because, you know, bills and everything, and other times because I just want to try to do it all and forget I'm human. And that caused problems recently after I started the 6 months where I focus on writing alone and try to make it as an author and live on that. I did that thinking, oh, I'll cut out all that other work, and instead of working like Monday to Sunday and 12 hours a day, it will be just like a normal 9 to 5. But I forgot to take into account the fact that I went like that, you know, nonstop for 8 months, and that wasn't probably as healthy. Plus, you know, I think the whole challenge thing and how difficult it is hit me, and I was so terrified by it that I just didn't want to do it anymore. And as Sarah said, it usually helps me if I get out of the house. I mean, I get out of the house every day because I have the dog and I have to go to the doggy park, and that's fine, but that's part of the routine. If I get into a really big slump and I don't want to write, I don't want to do anything, I usually just go for a walk for like half an hour, and then if it still persists, I'll read a book. And that usually gets me in the mood for writing, especially if it's a good book. Or if it's a really terrible book. That also helps. Like, if it's so bad, I want to bang my head against the wall, which thankfully it happens super, super rarely, then I feel like writing again. Because I'm like, this can't be. No, it's impossible. I have to write a better story after reading this. I feel like I'm responsible to do that. So, yeah. Because Nicki mentioned she works on multiple stories at a time, and I used to do that. Do you ever feel like you get sidetracked by too many ideas? Misha?
Try again. You can go first, I don't mind.
Okay, no, you go.
Okay, so I really don't. I actually, when I decided to start going into working on multiple projects, I made myself a promise to prioritize everything I'm working on. So there would be one that I have to work on at least once a week, and then that thing, or I would try one every day or something like that, and then anything else I would do would be over the weekend for fun or whatever, so that I could actually make real noticeable progress on one instead of just adding a new project every time, because if I did it that way, I would just never finish anything. It really has to do with just prioritizing. Today I want to work on my fantasy thing. Tomorrow I will work on something else if I get stuck. But usually if I don't get stuck, I keep working on the main thing and then only switch over once I get stuck. And the moment I get unstuck again, I'll just get back to the first one. And I have done that with my record is working on 7 manuscripts at one time. But it's just, yeah, especially what happens with that is when, for example, I'm rough drafting, because I write by hand, it's a lot slower to work on one project. I could write maybe 500 words in an hour. Slow down a lot to do it by hand. And then what happens is then what I do is, for example, especially if I'm doing something like Nano, where I have a very big word count to catch up on, I can't just do it by hand. So then I would have one project that I'm rough drafting, the one that I'm going to put onto the computer, or one that I'm editing from each other. But then I can make up words for something else and been able to get as many words from because of the stage of the creative process that it's at. Still get everything done, but just allow for the difference in what I'm doing at that specific time to make up words. So yeah.
Nicki?
I'd say it doesn't happen too much. I mean, the two publishers that closed were the ones for whom I was writing most of those anthology stories. So with them gone, I haven't had quite so many competing projects. The only thing I found sometimes was that those anthology stories, although I loved all the stories that I wrote for them, I wasn't as emotionally invested in them at times as I was in the one that had been a complete inspiration piece. So occasionally you kind of, you knew you had to get this word count down because the anthology called deadline's coming up, but that inspiration was like nudging at you for this other piece. So that was the only thing that I found difficult at times. But I mean, I'm fairly self-disciplined, so I would usually just jot down notes on anything I was thinking for that one and just get those deadline pieces out first. But these days, as I said, I'm not writing quite so many anthologies at the moment, so it's less of an issue, and I just work on whatever I feel like at the time.
Sarah?
I really only work on one thing at a time. Once in a blue moon, I'll get like a idea for a short story, and I'll write that out, and then over a week or so, I'll edit it. But that's such a quick thing that I kind of shoot out that it doesn't take up as much of my mind and stuff. So it's not really as big of a deal, but I don't usually work on more than one thing.
Yeah, I had a teensy tiny problem with that because I used to get all these ideas and I was trying to do what Misha said she was doing, write on what I was inspired to write, and then if I felt like I was hitting a wall or a slump or something, I would move to something else and write that. But it very fast degenerated into having too many ideas and not wanting to write any of them, or just taking way too long to finish something. So my solution to that was to create a schedule and plan when I'd be drafting something, and then to keep myself on track, because I can just make a plan and then change it whenever I want. I created a parallel plan for when I was supposed to release certain titles. So if I had a release date planned and all the promotional stuff around it, and I had talked to my editor and they were, booking a certain slot of time for my work, then I had to keep with the schedule. And that was a neat trick, and it worked really well this year, and I feel like I've been a lot more productive. But I still get many other story ideas. So this leads into the next question. If, let's say, you're working on something and you get story ideas because it happens, but you can't get to them right that moment, how do you keep track of them? Do you jot them down or have a special notebook or something, or an XLS file? Misha?
Yep, I write them down. I have this huge to-do list that I have on my computer that I deal with the basic concept and then I leave it at that. Sometimes, I like I mentioned, I would just, if it really is pushing at the back of my head, then I just write it and get it over with. I had a situation, and it's kind of tragic to me, that I had an idea that I love and I still love deeply, and I decided to write it, break after one of my other stories, and then I basically wrote, I think it was a 30,000 word rough draft by hand in 10 days, which is staggering. And then I wrote the rewrite the next time I took a break. I did the rewrite, and that's like a 50,000 word novel at the moment. I did in 14 days. So that thing just writes itself, but now it's lying around waiting for me to one day get to it, because the books that I have published already have to take priority, otherwise I'd never finish the series. Really, like at the moment, because this kind of time of the year as well, it kind of ties in with all that. It's really reminding me of the fact that I really want to write this book and now I can't. So it's like but in general, I write down, even if it's just stupid, it sounds like a silly little, what if this little thing happens? Ooh, that should be a storybook. And then I just write it down. Because one day I'm going to get to the point where the War of Six Crowns is finished. And then I would want to know what I'm going to go do from that. And then I have like, I think the last time I counted was 35 books. That's for me. So that's actually nice, because that's always my worst thing, is thinking about finishing a book and you're like, okay, well, now what am I doing? I'm not inspired or whatever. And now I don't have to worry about it, because that thing, it's all lined up. I even have an order in which I want to publish them also.
Yeah, that makes sense. Nicki, how about you?
I have a notebook. If I hadn't been so zombied when I woke up, I might have had a forethought to bring it and wait and show you, because it's quite amusing. My friend Sarah bought it for me, and it's a Tom Hiddleston quote notebook. So there's a nice little photo, or a nice little picture of Tom Hiddleston on the front with some of his quotes, like on the little bottoms of the pages, which she thought I would love for last Christmas. That was her gift. So that's become my writing notebook. And I use that for two purposes. Initially, on some of the first pages is where I just jot down ideas. Like I've probably got maybe 10 to 15 ideas there, which is just like 1 to 2 sentences, just with a plot idea or a character idea, something that I might like to come back to later. And after that, I usually have 1 to 2 pages, it's an A5 per story. And that's my initial sort of inspiration pages, where I'll start to jot down a few ideas for names, some of their character traits or appearance sketching, until I'm ready to start a proper character profile and get into the story. So I have that, and if any ideas come to me, they all go in there, and that's just my little stockpile. So when I finish this current piece, I've got one lined up already in my mind that I want to work on next. So it's just a place to gather it all.
Yeah, that's super handy. Sarah?
I don't really keep thoughts. I kind of figure that if they're worth a whole lot, then they'll stick, and they'll still be there later. The real reason is that if I wrote them down, I'd just lose it anyway. So.
Well, actually, I had a problem with that at some point, because I would write them down, but not in the same place. So I'd have this pile of notebooks and like a few journals, and all had story ideas. And now I keep them separate. I have my journal, and then I have my idea notebook or something. I use it to, plan out chapters for the serial that goes on my blog, and to write down story ideas. And sometimes it's just like a character and their setting. Other times it's a more developed thing, or if it's really nagging, I'll just take half an hour and write a page or two, like 500 words, and then save it in my writing folder and just let it stay there. The thing is, like, by the time I get to my jotted down ideas, it will probably be 2020, because when I wasn't as, disciplined, and I was just switching between stories, I started so many that are waiting for me to finish. I think I did a pretty good job of finishing some of them this year, but I still have like 6 or 7 which have like 10,000 words or 30,000 words or 50,000 words. Just need my attention to finish that and rewrite, and then I can start new stories. Plus, as Misha said, if I have some series that need sequels or a new book in the series, if they're not connected, those tend to take priority because people are expecting the sequel. And God knows they've waited for sequels from me longer than anyone should. I mean, I think it's been 2 years now since I promised I'd publish the final book in my vampire series, and I haven't yet. I have about half of it written though, so I think that's encouraging. I could have no words written, but I even have the cover art. I mean, the cover is almost ready, and the book is nowhere in sight. But anyway,
so we should call you the Romanian George R.R. Martin then, should we, Alina?
No, because I don't take 10 years. And
not yet.
I used to think George R.R. Martin was bad, but you should check some of the Japanese writers for like anime and manga. I mean, if anyone watches Berserk, like that dude took his characters, put them on a boat, and like 13 years later, they finally descended from the boat. Of course, stuff has happened on the boat, but still, 13 years, dude, like, get them off the boat already. The truth is, he's really good, and the manga looks like a piece of art. Every page looks like a piece of art, and I understand why it takes him so long. But I'm also feeling bad for all the people waiting for it. And I think it was like that for Evangelion, where they waited for like 10 years for Anno to get his shit together and start doing the movies. And I think that guy is a freaking troll, because he was on Twitter like a few months ago saying, "Oh, I'm finally starting to work on the 3rd Eva movie." And everybody was, you mean the one that was supposed to be released last year? That one? Yeah. So, I mean, there's still hope I'm not that bad. Because at least I've released other things in the meantime. Like, it's not nothing, completely nothing. So, but yeah, I think I'm getting there. If I don't publish the 3rd book next year, I'm going to kill myself. I'm kidding, I'm not. But probably I will get some death threats from someone eventually. But yeah, I'm awful. I know. I'm sorry. I'm bad. So, what kind of advice would you guys give to new authors that are struggling with inspiration and, you know, just need to be pointed in the right direction, just to wrap things up? Misha?
I think mine would be Jack London's advice, which is you can't wait for inspiration. You have to go hunting for it at the club. I think
that's great advice.
You can't sit around going, "Oh, I'm not inspired." You have to go. You have to go work. I like to think of it as show up and just start writing and keep writing until you do feel inspired. But it's not really, for me, especially with a novel, if you have the beginning and the middle and the end, if you have any idea of where you want to go, if you have that concept and you have your characters, you don't really need to be inspired because you already know where you're going, so you just need to fill in the blanks. And so this whole idea of, "Ooh, I need to be inspired," is actually, especially specifically for novels, not really, in my experience, something that's the thing. Because usually inspiration, double-edged sword, that thing with, "Oh, I have a brilliant idea," it's for another book.
That's true.
Yeah, that's kind of what I always say. Be careful of wanting to be inspired, just write the book. But that's my advice.
Thank you. Nicki?
I'd say similar to Misha in a way. I think the worst thing is to sit there and do nothing. I mean, even if you're not inspired for the piece you're trying to work on, just write anything, even if it's just an account of your day, just to get the words flowing, or a little bit of flash fiction. If you just can think of like a little funny story idea that's just a few hundred words. Anything just to get you writing, and then you might find it comes easier with your main piece after that.
Yeah, that's great. Sarah?
I think it would just be to just try to get something out, even if you don't think it's very good. Just get it out and try to look at it later to see how you feel about it, and then fix it and learn from it.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, and I think we're all kind of agreeing on this. Inspiration is all good and great, but you don't need it to write. Sometimes you just need to go there, open a document or a notebook and wait for the words to come, or put some random words on the page until the right ones come. And just another piece of advice, if you don't know what to write at all, just try finding some writing prompts. There are books on writing prompts, or there are writing prompts on Twitter, I've seen some, or in Facebook groups. So if you're in an author group of any kind, you can ask there for a place to find prompts, and that will help get you started if you just can't think of anything.
Yeah, if I can give another tip as well, if you're feeling stuck, especially because of the blank page, just write anything. I've once broken an 8-month-long block simply by writing the sludge he was eating stuck to the roof of his mouth like peanut butter. The problem was he hated peanut butter, and that was literally just the start to a chapter. And just because I wrote something, it was enough to get over that. And it had nothing to do with anything going on in the story, but it just gave me a reason to figure out, okay, so why is he eating the sludge then, and what's he doing there, and where is he? And that was kind of where it was. And the funny thing is, it made it to the final book. It made it to 47 editing rounds.
That's a win right there.
That made it into the book, and it's canon. But it's literally, it's. I think a lot of people have this idea that they're not going to write just anything that occurs to them because it's not going to be nice and it's going to be nonsense. But really, sometimes you don't know if something is going to be good or not down, and probably even a good 6 months down the line from that. So it's just really worth it to just write whatever, and then and that's often what it's just literally to break to get going. So that's my little bit of advice as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's great advice. I want to thank you all for being here again for another hour-long chat. I'm sorry it went a little over, but I'm a bit scattered. I forgot to check the clock at some point. I hope I see you again next month for the next chat. I will come up with a topic or ask you for help. And if you're watching this now or in the future and would like us to debate a certain topic, just leave it in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in October. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.